In 1954, just months before his death, Albert Einstein delivered a lecture that was immediately classified by the US government and erased from public record. This extraordinary session, attended by only 7 people at Princeton University, revealed Einstein's most profound theories about consciousness, the universe, and the true nature of human existence. Recently uncovered transcripts show how the world's most brilliant mind connected quantum physics with the human soul in ways modern science is only beginning to understand. They buried this knowledge because it challenges everything we think we know, said Dr. James Mitchell, who discovered the documents in a forgotten Princeton archive. The revelations within could transform how we view our place in the cosmos. The setting was intimate, a small wood-paneled room in Princeton's mathematics building on a rainy April evening. Light from brass lamps cast long shadows as Einstein, then 75, moved with surprising vigor to a simple wooden podium. The 7 attendees, 3 physicists, a theologian, a philosopher, and 2 government officials, sat in complete silence as Einstein cleared his throat. The transcript begins with the journalist's observations. Einstein seems different tonight, more urgent, more focused, as if unburdened by the need to simplify or sanitize his thoughts. His wild hair and penetrating eyes give him the look of a prophet rather than a scientist. "I have remained silent on these matters for decades," Einstein began, his German accent thick but his words precise. "But at this stage of my life, with what time I have remaining, I feel compelled to share what I believe to be true, even if it contradicts much of what I have published throughout my career." One of the physicists shifted uncomfortably. The government officials exchanged glances. The journalist wrote, "There is tension in the room, as if everyone understands that what follows cannot be unheard." Einstein continued, "The distinction we make between matter and mind, between physical and spiritual, is a false duality. This misconception has led science down a limited path. What we call consciousness is not produced by the brain, but rather channeled through it, like a radio receives signals. The brain does not create consciousness any more than a television creates the programs it displays." The room fell silent. The journalist noted, "Einstein's hands move as he speaks, as if trying to shape the very air into the concepts he describes. His confidence is absolute." The transcript reveals Einstein then walked to a chalkboard and began writing equations, complex mathematical formulas that the journalist couldn't comprehend, but dutifully copied. "These equations," Einstein explained, "suggest that consciousness is a fundamental property of the universe, like space-time or energy. Not emergent, but primary. Not a product of evolution, but a driving force behind it." The theologian leaned forward, clearly intrigued. "Do you mean to suggest, Professor Einstein, that you are describing what religions have called the soul?" Einstein smiled. "Labels create division, where there is unity. But yes, what religions have termed the soul appears to be mathematically consistent with what these equations describe, a non-local consciousness that exists beyond the constraints of space-time. My calculations suggest that what we experience as individual consciousness is actually connected to a unified field, small waves in a vast ocean." The journalist wrote, "There is an electric tension in the room." One of the government officials has stopped taking notes and simply stares at Einstein with an expression that combines awe and apprehension. Einstein continued, his voice growing stronger. "The universe, at its most fundamental level, is not made of matter but of information, of thought. Matter emerges from this consciousness, not the other way around. The equations show that the observer effect in quantum physics is not merely about measurement disrupting systems. It is about consciousness directly interacting with the fundamental fabric of reality." One of the physicists raised his hand. "Professor Einstein, what you're describing sounds more like Eastern mysticism than Western science." Einstein laughed. "The separation between these traditions is artificial. The mathematics leads where it leads. If it aligns with ancient wisdom, perhaps this should give us pause about dismissing such traditions. The Vedantic traditions of India described this interconnected consciousness thousands of years ago. Their intuitive understanding aligns remarkably well with these formulations." The journalist observed, Einstein moves to the window, looking out at the rain for a long moment. When he turns back, his expression has changed. There is an intensity, a clarity that seems almost luminous. "Let me be more direct," Einstein said. "These equations suggest that death, as we understand it, is an illusion created by our limited perception. Consciousness does not end when the brain stops functioning, any more than a radio program ceases to exist when you turn off your radio. Our individual awareness returns to the unified field, transformed by our experiences, but not extinguished by the physical body's end." The government officials were writing furiously now. The theologian had tears in his eyes. The journalist noted, "The room feels charged with significance, as if history itself is being rewritten in this small space." Einstein continued, "The implications extend beyond our understanding of death. If consciousness is primary and interconnected, then our perception of separation is the great illusion. We are not isolated beings moving through an empty universe. We are expressions of a unified consciousness, temporarily experiencing itself through billions of perspectives simultaneously." He paused, looking directly at each person in the room. "This is not merely philosophical. The mathematics suggests practical applications, technologies that could allow direct consciousness-to-consciousness communication, unmediated by physical means. Devices that could demonstrate the non-local nature of mind. Experiments that could prove definitively that consciousness survives bodily death." One of the government officials interrupted, "Professor Einstein, surely you understand the implications of what you're suggesting. If proven, this would upend religious institutions, psychological frameworks, our entire understanding of human identity." Einstein nodded. "Yes, and perhaps this is why these insights meet with such resistance. Not because they lack mathematical validity, but because they threaten too many power structures built upon our sense of separation. Consider how the world would change if we proved beyond doubt that consciousness continues after death, that we are fundamentally connected, that intention shapes reality at the quantum level. The economic, political, and religious implications would be revolutionary." The journalist noticed one of the government officials discreetly activating a recording device. Einstein seemed to notice too, but continued undeterred. "I have conducted experiments in my private laboratory that demonstrate non-local consciousness effects. When properly shielded from electromagnetic interference, the human mind can directly influence quantum probability states at distances that preclude conventional explanations. Even more remarkable, these effects appear to operate outside normal temporal constraints. The intention of the observer can influence events that have already occurred, provided the results have not been observed and collapsed into definite states." The physicist who had objected earlier stood up abruptly. "This is pseudoscience, Albert. You cannot possibly have evidence for such outlandish claims." Einstein's response was calm but firm. "The evidence exists, but requires us to expand our methodology beyond current scientific paradigms. Just as quantum physics demanded we abandon certain classical assumptions, the study of consciousness demands we reconsider our materialist biases. The mathematics is unambiguous. The experimental results, while preliminary, are consistent with the theory." The journalist wrote, Einstein retrieves a folder from his briefcase. Inside are photographs, charts, and data tables. As he spreads them on the table, the government officials exchange concerned glances. "These results from my private laboratory show repeatable, statistically significant effects that cannot be explained by conventional physics. Consciousness directly affects quantum probability states, and these effects persist across both space and time in ways that suggest consciousness operates non-locally. Even more compelling are the cross-subject entanglement effects, where separated individuals show synchronized brain activity without any conventional communication." The silence that followed was profound. The theologian finally spoke. "Professor Einstein, you are describing what mystics have claimed for millennia, that consciousness is universal, that we are one, that physical reality is in some sense dreamlike. Are you prepared for the consequences of presenting such ideas to the world?" Einstein's expression became grave. "I am an old man now. My reputation can withstand the controversy. What matters is the truth, however uncomfortable. These insights could help humanity at a crucial juncture in our development. We possess terrible weapons that could destroy civilization, created through our existing scientific paradigm. Perhaps a science that recognizes the primacy of consciousness and our fundamental interconnection would foster greater responsibility and compassion." The journalist observed, "Einstein appears both tired and energized. as if unburdened by finally speaking these thoughts aloud, yet aware of the weight they carry. "There is one more aspect of these discoveries I must share," Einstein continued. "The equations suggest that consciousness does not merely observe reality, it participates in creating it. The act of observation is not passive, but creative. When extended to its logical conclusion, this means that collective human consciousness shapes our shared reality. Our expectations, beliefs, and intentions do not just interpret the world, they help manifest it." One government official, who had remained silent until now, spoke sharply. "Professor Einstein, such ideas could be dangerous in the wrong hands. They could undermine public trust in scientific authority, create mass hysteria about psychic phenomena, even threaten national security if foreign powers develop these theoretical consciousness technologies first." Einstein nodded slowly. "Yes, there are risks, but there are greater risks in suppressing truth. Humanity stands at a crossroads. We have developed the capacity to destroy ourselves without developing the wisdom to ensure we do not. These discoveries about consciousness could foster a new relationship with ourselves, each other, and the planet, one based on recognition of our fundamental unity, rather than the illusion of separateness that fuels conflict and exploitation." The journalist wrote, "Einstein turns directly to the government officials, his gaze intense and unwavering. I understand you may classify this information. You may confiscate these notes, swear everyone to secrecy, label me a senile old man who has lost his scientific rigor. But the universe operates according to its own laws, regardless of our political concerns. These truths will emerge eventually, whether through my work or another's. The question is whether we will have the courage to face them, or will continue hiding from our own nature for fear of the changes it might demand of us." The rain had stopped outside. Moonlight streamed through the window, casting Einstein's shadow long across the wooden floor. Recall that the theories of relativity were once considered absurd and threatening. Quantum physics was dismissed as mystical nonsense by many of my colleagues, yet they described reality more accurately than Newtonian physics, despite the discomfort they caused. These insights about consciousness represent the next great revolution in our understanding, one that unifies science and spirituality rather than positioning them as adversaries. Einstein gathered his papers carefully. "I have prepared a complete monograph detailing these theories and supporting evidence. It is in a secure location, with instructions for its release at a future time when humanity might be more receptive. Whether that will be years, decades, or centuries, I cannot say. But the truth has patience that we humans often lack." The journalist noted, as Einstein concludes, "There is a palpable sense that something momentous has transpired in this room, something that might never reach the public record." As the meeting ended, government officials collected all materials, notes, and recordings. Attendees were required to sign non-disclosure agreements under the guise of national security. The journalist's attempts to access any record of this meeting in subsequent weeks were met with denials that it had ever occurred. Einstein himself was reportedly visited by government representatives multiple times in his final months, though the content of these conversations remains unknown. As Einstein prepared to leave that evening, he paused by the journalist, speaking quietly so only he could hear. "Truth is not determined by consensus. Remember what you heard tonight, even if you can never publish it. The ideas themselves have power. They will find their way into the world when the time is right." The journalist kept one small notebook hidden, containing fragments of what transpired that night. It remained concealed for nearly 7 decades until now. What makes this discovery particularly significant is that it aligns with several other classified documents that have recently come to light through Freedom of Information Act requests. Dr. Mitchell has spent the last decade piecing together fragmentary evidence from various sources, declassified government files, personal letters from Einstein's colleagues, and testimony from the families of those present at the lecture. "The pattern is unmistakable," Dr. Mitchell explains. "Multiple independent sources confirm that Einstein was conducting consciousness research in his final years, research that the government actively suppressed. The implications were simply too radical for the scientific paradigm of that era, and perhaps even for ours." The most compelling corroboration comes from Dr. Helen Dukas, Einstein's longtime secretary and archivist, who reportedly maintained a separate collection of Einstein's sensitive papers. documents that were deliberately kept separate from his official archives. Before her death in 1982, she allegedly entrusted these papers to a colleague with instructions not to release them until 2050. However, according to Dr. Mitchell, a flood in the Princeton archives in 2019 damaged the sealed containers, necessitating emergency conservation efforts that inadvertently revealed their contents. What we found confirmed the existence of Einstein's consciousness research beyond any reasonable doubt, Dr. Mitchell states. There were laboratory notebooks, theoretical calculations, and correspondence with figures from both Western science and Eastern spiritual traditions. Einstein was conducting a deep investigation into the nature of consciousness that bridged physics, philosophy, and mysticism. Perhaps most stunning are the implications for quantum entanglement, what Einstein famously called spooky action at a distance. According to the newly discovered documents, Einstein had come to believe that entanglement was not just a physical phenomenon, but evidence of an underlying unity of consciousness. The standard narrative is that Einstein rejected quantum mechanics, Dr. Mitchell explains, but these documents suggest a much more nuanced position. He rejected the Copenhagen interpretation, but was developing his own alternative framework that incorporated consciousness as a fundamental rather than emergent property. The documents reveal that Einstein conducted experiments with skilled meditators, measuring quantum effects that correlated with their mental states. Using modified Geiger counters and early random number generators, he documented statistically significant deviations that suggested conscious intention could influence quantum probability states. These were rudimentary versions of experiments that wouldn't be conducted again until the 1970s with the Princeton Engineering Anomalies Research Laboratory. Dr. Mitchell notes, Einstein was decades ahead of his time, anticipating the field of consciousness studies that's only now beginning to gain mainstream scientific acceptance. The physicist David Bohm, who later developed his own theories about consciousness and quantum reality, apparently had access to some of Einstein's suppressed work. Bohm's concepts of the implicate order and the holographic universe bear striking similarities to ideas outlined in Einstein's forbidden lecture. There's a direct lineage here, Dr. Mitchell suggests. Bohm was carrying forward Einstein's suppressed research, developing it in ways that could be presented within the scientific framework of his time without triggering the same governmental concerns. In one particularly striking passage from the journalist's recovered notes, Einstein addressed the philosophical implications directly. The universe we observe exists because we observe it. Consciousness is not an accidental byproduct of physical processes, but the foundation upon which physical reality rests. This is not mysticism, but mathematics. Not philosophy, but physics. The equations do not lie, even when they lead us to uncomfortable truths. For the government officials present that night, these ideas represented a security concern. If consciousness could influence physical reality across space and time, the strategic implications were enormous. The Cold War was escalating, and both superpowers were investigating any potential weapons advantage. According to recently declassified documents, the US government subsequently launched Project Stargate, a long-term research program investigating remote viewing and other consciousness-based phenomena with potential military applications. What we're seeing is that Einstein's suppressed work may have inadvertently spawned decades of classified consciousness research, Dr. Mitchell explains. The CIA's remote viewing program, Soviet psychotronic research, these highly classified projects may all have roots in Einstein's forbidden theories. Perhaps most poignantly, the journalist's notes reveal Einstein's awareness that his ideas would be suppressed. I entrust these thoughts to the future, knowing the present is not yet ready to receive them. When humanity reaches a sufficient level of development, when we have evolved beyond our tendency towards self-destruction, these insights will re-emerge. The truth cannot be permanently hidden. It can only be temporarily obscured. In his later years, Einstein reportedly spoke to his closest confidants about having discovered something more profound than relativity, a unified theory, not just of physical forces, but of consciousness itself. He described it as the unified field of mind, a concept that integrated physics with the deepest questions of human existence. According to the journalist's notes, Einstein stated that evening, "If we truly understood the mathematics of consciousness, we would see that immortality is not a religious fantasy, but a physical fact. Not personal immortality in the conventional sense, but the indestructibility of conscious experience itself. Death is a transition, not an ending. This is not wishful thinking, but a direct implication of the equations themselves. The theologian present at the lecture, later identified as Dr. Paul Tillich, apparently incorporated aspects of Einstein's ideas into his concept of the ground of being, the fundamental reality underlying all existence, yet he never explicitly credited Einstein, likely due to the classification of the meeting. What we're witnessing is the rediscovery of a missing chapter in intellectual history, Dr. Mitchell contends. Einstein's final breakthrough was erased, but its influence subtly shaped subsequent thinkers across multiple disciplines. It's a scientific version of a suppressed religious text, hidden but never truly gone, waiting to be rediscovered when the time is right. Today, as quantum physics continues to reveal the observer effect, as studies of non-local consciousness accumulate evidence, and as the hard problem of consciousness remains unsolved by materialist approaches, Einstein's forbidden lecture seems increasingly prophetic. Leading physicists like Roger Penrose and neuroscientists like Christoph Koch are now seriously investigating consciousness as a fundamental rather than emergent property, ideas that echo Einstein's suppressed work. The journalist's final entry from that evening reads, "Einstein's last words to me were strangely emotional. As we parted, he gripped my arm and said, 'The universe and the observer exist as a pair. The moment consciousness ceases to exist, the universe would cease to exist. And if the universe ended, consciousness would continue. That is the mathematics. That is the truth. Remember it.' I did not understand then. I am not certain I understand now, but I cannot forget." If you found this insight into Einstein's secret teachings valuable, make sure to like and share this video. What do you think about Einstein's suppressed theories on consciousness? Could this lost knowledge change everything we thought we knew about reality? Comment below with your thoughts on how these ideas could transform our understanding of existence. Are we ready for what Einstein knew all those years ago?